For 15. December 11, 1899. Magersfontein, South Africa. In the pre-dawn stasis of the high veld, a nameless burgher secures the laces of his leather boots. His movements are clinical, practiced, and devoid of the tremors associated with impending kinetic engagement. Beside him lies a Mauser Model 1895, its internal magazine loaded with 5 rounds of 7 by 57 mm ammunition. He carries 60 rounds in total. This is his entire inventory for the coming hours. Below the ridge, the Highland Brigade 15,000 men strong marches in tight, close-order formation. Their rhythmic footfalls vibrate through the parched earth, a mechanical sound of an empire in motion. For the lone burgher, the tactical reality is defined by a zero stat. He has 1 rifle, 0 concealment options on the open ground, and a 100% statistical certainty of death if his position is compromised. There is no trench to hide in and no reverse slope for retreat. Instead of seeking cover in the soil, he begins a deliberate ascent into the thorny branches of a lone mimosa tree. To a conventional strategist, this is a tactical absurdity, a self-imposed death trap with no viable line of withdrawal. By climbing, he is trading mobility for a fixed point in space. It is a decision that defies survival instincts. This verticality suggests a hidden calculus, where the hunter accepts exposure for lethal advantage. Quiet. He is ready. The rifle is up. The dawn is near. The math works. But he wasn't looking for an exit. He was looking for an angle. The British High Command of 1899 operated on a doctrine of Victorian kinetic momentum. Their tactical manual was built around the charge, a psychological belief that bayonet-fixed aggression could negate any defensive fortification. This wasn't merely a strategic preference. It was a refusal to calculate the impact of evolving ballistics. Specifically, they ignored the mechanical transition from black powder to nitrocellulose-based smokeless propellants. In the era of black powder, every shot generated a massive white signal of smoke, revealing the shooter's position instantly. Smokeless powder removed this visual footprint, creating a lethal invisible math where the hunter remained a ghost. By December 1899, this refusal to adapt resulted in Black Week, a series of catastrophic defeats where casualties exceeded 2,700 men in 6 days. At Magersfontein, the disparity was stark, a ratio of 10 to 1. 15,000 elite British troops, including the Highland Brigade, moved across the veldt in dense quarter-column blocks. In terms of engineering, this formation maximized the target profile for Boer riflemen while minimizing return fire effectiveness. The Boer command understood something the British could not. Raw numbers are irrelevant if the source of fire cannot be located. As the sun crested the horizon, the British were caught in a geometric trap. There were no muzzle flashes and no smoke clouds to suppress. It was a complete system failure of command. One man, positioned in a tree, could now apply pressure to an entire brigade because he existed outside their visual spectrum. 15,000 men were held in place, forced to lay flat in the dirt under a blistering sun, dying one by one from an unseen force. This was the gap between 19th century ego and 20th century physics. The soldiers in the mud were victims of a fundamental miscalculation in ballistics and human perception. They were optimized for a battle that no longer existed on this planet or in this century. He was a phantom utilizing the cold laws of physics against them with absolute precision. To understand how one man in a tree paralyzed an army, we have to look at the machine in his own steady hands. The Mauser Model 1895 was not just a rifle. It was a calibrated instrument of longitudinal precision. While the British Lee Metford relied on the .303 rimmed cartridge, a heavy and slower projectile with a high arc of flight, the Boer marksman utilized the 7 by 57 mm Mauser round. This cartridge was a masterclass in aerodynamic efficiency. The 7 mm projectile possessed a superior ballistic coefficient, meaning it cut through the dense South African air with minimal velocity loss. Furthermore, its high sectional density allowed the bullet to maintain stability and penetrate deep upon impact, even at extended ranges. Because of this high-velocity engineering, the Mauser 1895 offered a remarkably flat trajectory. For a shooter at 400 yards, the vertical drop was negligible. While the British infantry would have to adjust their sights or calculate complex holdover points to hit a target, the Berger simply pointed and fired. The bullet traveled on a laser-like path, forgiving small errors in distance estimation. This mechanical reliability was paired with a counter-intuitive optical strategy. Conventional military logic suggested the tree was for height and visibility, but the physics of the African sun provided a different advantage. As the veldt heated, the air directly above the soil began to churn, creating a mirage layer. This thermal convection caused light to refract, creating a dancing heat shimmer that made distant targets appear to shift and blur for anyone lying on the ground. For the British soldiers pinned in the dirt, the world at 400 yards was a vibrating and distorted mess. They were effectively firing at ghosts. However, by climbing 12 feet into the mimosa tree, the marksman elevated his line of sight above this turbulent boundary layer. He was looking down through stable and cooler air. From his perch, the chaotic shimmer vanished. He saw the battlefield in high definition, seeing every brass button and every panicked movement with surgical clarity. The British were optically blind, trapped in a refractive haze of their own environment, while he operated in a clear and stabilized window. This was the stupid trick that converted a vulnerable position into a fortress of observation. He did not just have a better rifle, he had a better atmosphere. The 7 by 57 mm round was seated in the chamber. The internal magazine was full. The striker was cocked, the sear holding back the spring with 5 pounds of tension. He rested the barrel against a solid branch, using the wood as a natural stabilizer to eliminate heartbeat-induced sway. His breathing slowed, matching the rhythm of the wind. Every variable, including windage, elevation, and optical refraction, had been accounted for in his mental ledger. He had neutralized the British numbers by mastering the physics of his environment. The disparity between his single rifle and their 15,000 men had been bridged by engineering and atmospheric science. The first target entered the optic field. He was a British officer, distinguished by the glint of sunlight on his polished sword hilt. Distance was 400 yards. The math was perfect. Now, the trigger had to meet the moment. The engagement begins with a single two-stage trigger pull. Inside the chamber, the firing pin strikes the primer, igniting the smokeless nitrocellulose charge. The 173-grain bullet is forced through the rifling at 2,300 feet per second. In the mimosa tree, the recoil is absorbed by the marksman's shoulder and the wood of the branch. He cycles the Mauser's toggle joint bolt. The brass casing is ejected, spinning into the thorns, while a fresh round is stripped from the magazine and seated with a metallic click. He does not fire at the mass of infantry. He targets the specific high-reflectivity markers. British officers at Magersfontein were walking beacons of Victorian tradition. Their polished brass buttons, silver whistles, and steel sword hilts acted as high-contrast beacons against the dull brown of the veldt. To the man in the tree, these were not humans. They were command nodes. He fires again. The second round finds a captain, then a major, as he completes his first 5-round magazine. The barrel of the Mauser begins its initial phase of thermal expansion. The steel molecules vibrate and stretch, a microscopic shift that the marksman compensates for with a tighter grip. On the ground, the British response is a psychological system crash. The air is filled with the high-pitched crack slap of supersonic projectiles, but there is no corresponding visual signal. In black powder warfare, a volley of this lethality would be accompanied by a wall of white smoke, providing a target for return fire. Here, there is nothing. The smokeless powder leaves the air crystalline and empty. The British soldiers are looking for a cloud that does not exist. This creates a mechanical failure in the chain of command. As officers fall, the brain of the Highland Brigade is systematically deleted. Without orders, the 15,000 soldiers do what their training dictates when under fire. They drop to the ground. But the ground offers no protection from a shooter 12 feet above the mirage layer. The marksman's vertical advantage turns the flat earth into a killing floor. He cycles the bolt again. The movement is rhythmic, almost industrial. Each pull of the toggle joint bolt represents a severed link in the British hierarchy. The infantrymen below lie paralyzed in the dirt, their rifles useless against a ghost. They are waiting for a command that will never come, because the men qualified to give it are lying face down in the scrub, their reflective buttons now dulled by blood and dust. The efficiency of the 7 by 57 mm round is absolute. There is no waste, only the cold subtraction of human leadership from the battlefield equation. The British Army, a massive engine of global power, has stalled because its spark plugs have been removed one by one. The Highland Brigade is no longer a fighting force. It is a static target waiting for an instruction that has been permanently erased. He watched the last of the operational staff crawl away. The officers were falling. The hierarchy was deleting itself. But then, the wind changed. 10:15 a.m. The sun is now a primary logistical adversary. The marksman has occupied the mimosa tree for 6 hours, with 4 hours of active kinetic engagement. Dehydration manifests as a localized tremor in the peripheral nervous system, a biological degradation that must be suppressed through sheer stoic focus. The temperature on the high veld has climbed to 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside the canopy, the thorns are no longer obstacles. They are anchors preventing a fall as muscle fatigue sets in. He identifies a cluster of men at the brigade's vanguard. One individual stands out, not through reflective metal, but through the geometry of the men surrounding him. This is General Andrew Wauchope. This is the ultimate command value target. The marksman calculates the windage, which has increased to a steady 5-knot crosswind from the east. He adjusts his point of aim exactly 3 inches to the left of the general's sternum to account for the drift. The Mauser cycles. The 7 by 57 mm round traverses the distance in approximately 0.52 seconds. Wauchope falls. The Highland Brigade is now effectively headless. The one bullet, one rank doctrine is applied with cold, arithmetic cruelty. As the general's staff collapses into tactical chaos, a messenger breaks from the cover of a small donga, sprinting toward the rear to alert the heavy artillery. The distance is 600 yards. The target is moving at a lateral velocity of approximately 12 feet per second. This is the impossible feat to achieve the kinetic intercept. The Berger must fire at an extreme downward angle of nearly 45 degrees while leaning out from the primary trunk. He is tethered only by his left arm hooked around a secondary branch. He leads the target by 2 full body lengths, calculating the drop of a round fired at such a steep declination. The trigger breaks. The messenger is intercepted mid-stride. The communication link between the trapped infantry and their supporting guns is severed. This single shot changes the perception of the Boer tactic forever. What the British High Command had previously mocked in London journals as unsportsmanlike and cowardly sniping is now revealed as a masterclass in asymmetrical dominance. The guerrilla is no longer a nuisance. He is a surgical technician. The Mauser's barrel is now dangerously hot to the touch. This heat creates a minute warping of the steel, a variable that is amplified at the 600-yard threshold where a hair's breadth of deviation results in a ballistic miss. He compensates through hard-won instinct. His mouth is a desert of dry dust. He is forced into an almost vertical firing position, his center of gravity shifting precariously over the 12-foot drop. Every shot is a gamble against the laws of gravity. If he falls, the British regain their command structure. If he stays, the 15,000 men below remain in a state of absolute tactical paralysis. The British Army is being held hostage by a single man in a tree who refuses to acknowledge their rules of engagement. They are trapped in a nightmare of his design, pinned by a weapon they cannot locate and a man they cannot see. The efficiency of the invisible math has reached its terminal peak. Underneath the tree, the soil is saturated with the consequences of this geometric isolation. The entire Highland Brigade exists now only as a collection of targets for a man whose only peer is the wind. There were only 15 rounds remaining in his final pouch. Sun peaked. He had emptied his third bandolier. Now, he had to solve the problem of gravity and the 15,000 men beneath him. By 1400 hours, the engagement enters a phase of biological attrition. The marksman has been stationary for nearly 10 hours. The human body is a machine fueled by ATP and water. Without replenishment, the system begins to degrade. Lactic acid buildup in the quadriceps and spinal extensors creates a persistent, agonizing cramp. To move is to risk a visual signature that 15,000 rifles would immediately suppress. He must remain a statue in a thorn bush. This is the logistics of the body. Calculating the exact amount of muscular tension required to stay perched versus the energy expenditure that leads to heatstroke. His core temperature rises. His vision narrows. He is down to his last magazine, 5 rounds of 7 by 57 millimeters. These are not for offense. They are the insurance policy for his extraction. If he is discovered during his descent, these final rounds represent the only barrier between himself and a bayonet. He stores them in the left pouch of his jacket. The British Brigade, shattered by the loss of their command nodes and the psychological weight of the unseen, begins a retrograde movement. This is not a formal retreat. It is a tactical withdrawal born of total systemic exhaustion. Thousands of boots and wagon wheels churn the parched South African soil, creating a massive, opaque particulate screen. This dust cloud is the mechanical variable he has been waiting for. It is a natural smoke screen, far more effective than the black powder clouds of the previous century. The ghost departure begins. He calculates the density of the rising dust. When horizontal visibility drops below 50 yards, he initiates his descent. His limbs are semi-responsive, stiffened by 8 hours of isometric stress. He moves with the slow, deliberate care of a machine operating with low hydraulic pressure. Every movement is calibrated to minimize the vibration of the dry mimosa branches. He reaches the base of the tree. He does not run. Running creates a distinct silhouette and kicks up a secondary dust trail. Instead, he traverses the terrain with a low-profile crawl, blending his movement with the rhythmic swaying of the sun-bleached veldt grass. To the retreating British, the tree remains a point of terror, a place they believe is still inhabited by a lethal phantom. They continue to fixate on the vacancy, while the marksman is already 300 yards away, slipping through the gaps in their collapsing perimeter. He has successfully utilized the enemy's own momentum to mask his escape. This is the ultimate technical triumph. To occupy the most exposed position on the battlefield, decapitate a brigade, and vanish without a single round being fired in his direction. The tree stands empty, a silent witness to a tactical anomaly that has rewritten the rules of modern engagement logic. He moved toward the horizon where his horse was hidden, his heartbeat finally returning to a resting state. He survived. He survived because he knew silence is lethal. He left the tree, but the British Army would never be the same. The fallout of the Battle of Magersfontein was not merely recorded in casualty lists. It was etched into the permanent transformation of British military doctrine. The iconic red coat, a 200-year-old pillar of imperial visibility, was officially rendered obsolete by the physics of the 7 by 57 mm Mauser round. In its place, the British Army adopted khaki, a forced mechanical evolution in camouflage and survival. This transition marked the death of the Victorian charge and the birth of modern concealment-based warfare. As for the man in the tree, his identity remains a subject of intense historical scrutiny and debate.